Hello everyone, I'm Mike Connors, and welcome to How It Ticks, the go-to podcast for anyone with a spark of curiosity about the inner workings of Switzerland. Hosted by yours truly, an Australian expat with a deep curiosity, How It Ticks offers a platform where listeners are invited to explore the vast landscape of Swiss culture, business, innovation, and tradition. Each episode features a one-on-one interview with experts and thought leaders from various fields, providing a panoramic view of what makes Switzerland tick. If you are like me and you enjoy listening to successful people share their insights, this podcast is for you. On today's episode, we delve into the vibrant world of tech startups with Ferdinand Langnickel, co-founder of Snipd, an innovative AI-powered podcast player that lets you save ideas from your favorite shows simply by tapping your headphones. Prior to his entrepreneurial venture, Ferdinand was a senior data scientist at Boston Consulting Group, where he developed machine learning solutions for large corporations. He also holds a PhD in finance from the University of Zurich. Today, we're going to explore Ferdinand's journey from academia and consultancy to launching a startup in the competitive tech landscape of Switzerland. We uncover the challenges and triumphs of starting a tech company, delve into the role of AI in enhancing our daily digital interactions, and get a peek into the future of podcasts. I hope you enjoy. Ferdinand, thank you very much for joining me today. I thought it would be a good idea to start off the conversation with you telling us a bit about Snipd, telling us a bit about where the idea came from and why you decided to pursue a startup to begin with.
Yeah, sure. I think generally I was interested in the idea of starting my own company probably when I was studying. A couple of my friends actually started a startup during my bachelor's. And then when I started my master's, I was involved in a couple of student clubs for entrepreneurship. So it was always kind of in the back of my mind to do this at some point. And then when it really happened, I think that a couple of things came together. One was, I think that's probably the most important, that it was just the right timing for me personally and also for that moment in my career. The second one was that we had an idea for a problem that nicely lining up with a technological change that we thought we can exploit. And then thirdly, I was lucky to have two amazing co-founders who also wanted to work on the same thing. And maybe to tell you a little bit about the story. So the initial idea actually came from Kevin, my co-founder. We were brainstorming problems that we could solve with AI. And he told me about this problem that he has with podcasts, that basically that there's so much information and knowledge in there and he likes listening to it, but then it's just impossible to save the information, go back to it, share it with others. And I was also listening to a lot of podcasts and could really relate to that. And we saw that two technological breakthroughs were basically shifting or were applied from NLP, from natural language processing, into speech AI. That was unsupervised learning. Basically allows you to train models on extremely large data sets because you don't need human labeling anymore. And the second was the transformer architecture, which is now basically used in almost any machine learning model. And so we really thought that even though at the time the technology wasn't very, very good yet, that we could build on that and solve this problem. And then luckily we could also convince Mikel, our third co-founder, to join us. He's an amazing engineer and he is a UI and UX magician, I would say. And that's basically the perfect complement for Kevin and I, because our background is more in data science and machine learning.
So I have a few questions. So firstly, you said it was the right timing for you in your life. What do you mean by that? I mean, I know that you were working for BCG before this, and that's a very particular style of working and isn't for everyone for a long period of time. When you say that it was the right timing, you think it was the right timing in your career, or there was other things going on which just made you want to sort of take this, I guess you'd call it risk?
Yeah, it's definitely a risk. Yeah, I think I was working for BCG for around 2 years at that time, and it was a bit, the time to make a decision whether I want to continue my career there or do something else. And I think I was leaning a bit towards look or doing something else. Also, partly because it's very hard to still meet your friends when you work in consultancies.
Mm.
And then also personally, I think from I mean, I did a PhD before, so I think from my age, it was a good timing from the experience that we brought in, and at the time I didn't have any kids, so it was also kind of easy to take that risk.
Mm. Why was it AI? Because I know this app existed, or this startup existed before ChatGPT, and therefore before every single person talks about it every day. So I guess that's something you were already focused on and doing at BCG, or was it just something you were interested in?
Yeah, I was working as a senior data scientist there, and I basically built machine learning applications. I was mainly doing personalization applications, so that involves like product recommendations, also churn predictions, forecasting. It was a lot of different things. Actually, not the kind of AI that we're doing now. I mean, we're also having a recommendation system in the app, but not NLP or speech to text. But I was, of course, following what's happening there, and I think for Kevin and me, it was clear if we do a startup that we want to build an AI startup because we really saw this technological trend that models just got better and better, and that was basically what we were betting on. And we also saw, you can also see it in our product that our AI also has evolved a lot. Yeah.
And how do you and Kevin know each other?
We actually met almost 12 years ago. Both came to Zurich to do our masters, and I think we've been good friends ever since. We played soccer together, did a lot of stuff, even not just studying.
Okay, so tell me a bit about Snipd then. You've mentioned that it helps pull out, using AI, it helps pull out some key information from podcasts, but more specifically, what are some of the features that it has and how does it differentiate itself from the other many podcast players?
Yeah, I think so. Snipd is a fully fledged podcast player, and we have a lot of AI powered features. And the main purpose of Snipd is that it helps people to save ideas from podcasts. So whenever you hear an insight or an interesting thought with Snipd, you can just tap your headphones to save that moment, and our AI will then basically determine what segment of the podcast you want to save, and then it creates a title and a short summary of that segment and saves it to your own knowledge library. And this segment that you can then also share with friends, you can go back to it. So that's the core functionality that most of our users use. And then we have a lot of other features around that are more, I would say, focused on helping you decide what to listen to. So we transcribe the podcasts, we identify the speakers, and we create chapters from podcasts. So it's in a way easy to jump to the part that you're most interested to, and also to get an overview of the episode. And then on top of that, we create a short description of the podcast, which is always in the same format. And we also create a short summary with the main takeaways of the podcast. And both of these are used by our users to decide what episode then to really listen to.
Hmm. And so I'm just thinking of an example. So I'm listening to Andrew Huberman tell me about telling me that I should get up early and get some sunlight, the first thing to do in the morning. But his podcast goes for 2.5 hours, and this is 90 minutes in. Essentially, I start listening to this, and I go, "Oh, this is great." The app is essentially the tool which I don't have to do anything. I can just hit Snipd, something like that, and that saves that segment of what he's been talking about.
Yeah. So if you hear that, if you're listening to that podcast and he just says this advice. You can triple tap your AirPods, and we will then, on average, we go back around like a minute. So we save a segment of around a minute length. You get the transcript of that, and we generate a title and a short summary with this main takeaway, basically that, you should get some sunlight in the morning.
Yeah, that's nice. And then I guess you can then create your own playlists of snips as opposed to making it much easier to carve up and save episodes as opposed to whole ones. I think it's interesting because I also listen to a lot of podcasts myself, and especially some of the super long form ones like the Joe Rogans or the Lex Friedmans, where it's 3 hours and you have some of these people and they start talking about politics. They end, talking about someone's personal experience in their life when they were a child and everything in between. And usually there's only about 30 or 40% of it which I enjoy listening to. So, I mean, it definitely makes a lot of sense as a problem that I can see being solved. Does it work as well? I mean, I can imagine this works really well for the use case which I have, which is listening to learn and interview style conversations. Does it work? Is it popular, or is it being used as well for more casual or radio style podcasts as well?
No, I think most of our users are people who are like you, who listen to podcasts to learn. I think usually that's either work-related topics or for personal growth. And it's often these interview format podcasts, but it can also be just a single narrator. I think Huberman also initially did a lot of podcasts without any guests, and now I think he has started to invite guests. But it's these knowledge-rich nonfiction podcasts which are the most popular on our platform. I think there's still some consumption also, for example, of news podcasts. So people use Snipd as their main podcast player then. What we don't see so much is fiction content, true crime, something like that. So, and it's also that, our app is very focused and optimized for this use case. It's also, I would say in a way, our strategy to differentiate ourselves from the normal podcast players, which usually focus more on, let's say, the mainstream case, which is entertainment, and their fiction content plays a big role. And it's not so much about the knowledge content.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. And so, without getting too technical, because you'll lose me, what are some of the sort of technical challenge or hurdles that you guys really spend your time on and have had to climb over to make this? I mean, it sounds like a relatively smart application. I'm sure it has not been easy, otherwise it would have been done before. What are some of the tough things you've had to work through, and if it's even possible to tell me that without getting too technical?
I think it's a good question. There are always challenges. I think especially in the beginning, one of the biggest challenge was to decide what we don't do, because you have a lot of ideas and a lot of things that you want to build, but you can only do so much in a given day, right? So that, I think, was the biggest challenge, but I think we made good decisions there, and we also spent like enough time to think about these things. Technical challenges, just in general, one thing I would say is that it is fairly easy to prototype something and to test something out. What's usually much more challenging is then to bring it into production and make sure it works all around the time. It's error robust. So that takes more time, also testing. So that's usually challenging. And then maybe one particular technical challenge that might be interesting, and I think it's not too technical, is dynamic ads. So for those who don't know, some podcasts use dynamic ads, and that means that at the time when a user clicks play, the hosting service that hosts the audio file will insert ads dynamically at that moment. And that's based on the location of the user and maybe some other parameters. And that's a way to basically have more personalized ads. And it's also a way for podcasters to monetize their podcasts more easily, so they don't need to read all the ads themselves. But what this means technically for us is that the audio file can be very different from one user to the other. And also the audio file that then maybe you get when you want to listen to it might be a different audio file than the one that we transcribed. And then the challenge is that we need to sync them again, basically. And there you really can't assume anything because it's really the Wild West. It can be that the ads have different lengths. It can be that just some ads are not in there. And so, yeah, you really need to find a very general solution for this. And yeah, initially when we started out, it was not a big problem. I would not even say it was a problem because very few podcasters use these dynamic ads. But then over time, it got more and more, it became more and more a problem because more and more podcasters used it. Also, our user base grew a lot. And we also wanted to bring these transcript features more into the app. And then at some point, we were really like, okay, we have to tackle this now. And we were always confident that we can solve it technically. But then I think, yeah, maybe it was almost a month that we spent on this. And now I think we have a nice, elegant solution. Because also one thing that's important to us is that we always stream the audio from the original link that is in the RSS feed of the creator, because that's in the end what the creators want to get the statistics of the listeners. So it was never an option for us to just host the audio files them ourselves because that's not what we wanted. So now we have a solution where we always stream the audio from the original source that the creator provides, but we can sync the transcript.
Could you just not record the transcript of the ads, given that I can't imagine that would add a lot of value to anyone and therefore the episodes would be consistent between users?
You would have to then identify the ads. And in the end, you could do that, but it's basically the same technical problem. You still need to then sync it again.
I see. Yeah. What about scale? I'm curious if tomorrow your podcast booms and 1 million people start using it, does much have to change, or is it sort of built to scale? Is that also something that you need to continuously work on as it gets bigger and bigger?
I think, it's built to scale. I mean, we use one of the big cloud providers, and it's basically everything scales automatically.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good. But but if it now really, let's say, 10x's from one day to the other, probably there are some things we have to check. So, but I think like 95% would just scale automatically. Mm-hmm. And then there's probably 5% where we have to check, and maybe have to scale something manually, or there was maybe some upper limit. But normally I think this is not really a challenge these days with the cloud providers.
Okay, yeah. I see.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So walk me through then the first year of getting a startup off the ground. I mean, you go from having this idea with a colleague / co-founder. What do you have to do? What are the processes? Who do you have to go and speak to get money to do this? And what do they want to see?
Maybe I start with the beginning. So we didn't start right away raising money. We made the decision to do this, and we decided to work on it also in the beginning without getting any salary. We started out just 3 of us, and for us it was clear that we have to get user feedback early on, because we had some ideas, of course, and we did some research before we started. But in the end, you don't really know what people want. You have to try it out. So I think we had the first prototype after 2 weeks. That one still Kevin and I just built, so it looked horrible. After that, Mikkel joined. But yeah, we had the first user test after 2 weeks, and then basically we iterated from there. Then Kevin and I basically built the backend and machine learning features, and Mikkel built the app. And we tested with friends and family, got feedback, and I think it was then probably 3 months in that we had conviction that we're onto something, and we then scoped what is needed to launch the app to the public. And there was still a lot of refactoring to be done for this. And I think that took us, we just talked about it today. I think it was 1.5 months. We worked on it to prepare the public launch, and then we launched it publicly. And then around that time, we also started fundraising. And then we raised our pre-seed round. Yeah, I think for fundraising, I would recommend to talk to other founders, ideally in an adjacent area. I mean, ideally, that means they work on similar things. But it can also be that they work in the same city, because that might also help a lot. They can give you great advice on which investors to talk to. They can also make introductions, which are super helpful. So fundraising is a lot about also network. And if you can get a good introduction to a fund, then usually they want to speak to you. So that I would definitely recommend.
What is the startup community like? It seems like you've got some pretty welcoming and approachable people that help you. So you've made some good relationships just by looking for different startup groups, something like that?
I think we also, we knew some people through other people. So we got introduced to other founders, and they were super helpful to us. I think you can also just write people on LinkedIn, shoot them an email. I think usually my impression is that founders are very open and helpful and are willing to go for a coffee to help other founders. We didn't go to many events in a sense. I also don't have the feeling that the community in Zurich is very attending a lot of these events. I think you probably have to approach them individually. But then everyone, or I think people are generally quite open to that. But I don't think that there are some events, and it's probably also good to go there. But my impression is that there are still a lot of founders who are willing to help, who don't go to these events.
And so tell me what the fundraising experience is like. I imagine first time doing it, it'd be a bit nerve-wracking, I'm assuming, asking strangers for money.
Yeah, I think at the pre-seed stage, at the time, I think there were also rounds raised with just a pitch deck. We already had I think, very good prototype, and we had good conviction based on the user testing that we did. Yeah, I think it didn't feel strange, I would say. I think was for us like the natural thing to do. But of course, we didn't have much experience at that point. How to do it, I think the pitch deck, now looking at it, could have been better. But of course, you can always say this in hindsight, right? In the end, it worked out quite nicely for us, I would say. We found great investors here in Zurich and also one in the US. So that was quite good. I think, what I can just recommend, what I already said, is try to get warm introductions, because that just helps you get in touch with the investors.
Did you do any market analysis as part of the pitch? This market analysis to go, look, we believe that there's this many podcast listeners, and with this kind of feature, is there some kind of analysis you can do, numbers you can provide to give them confidence that this is something that is worth investing in? How do you convince them besides giving them a really nice prototype?
Yeah, we definitely did some analysis like that, but I don't recall the details. But one thing is definitely that you show that the market that you're in is growing and that it is big enough for a VC scale. So I'm sure we showed some numbers on the podcasting market at the time, but I don't recall the details.
And then what's the standard amount of time or money they fund you for? I mean, I'm assuming that. So what are sort of the hurdles or the gates in which you have to get to for these different pre-seed rounds?
I think that can vary quite a bit, but I would say usually they don't. If it depends a bit. If you go to VCs, I think usually they would not fund something where you only have a runway of 6 months. So because they also know that it takes time. So I think that usually the amount that you raise is for a runway of 1.5 to 2 years.
Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing that the people or companies that you choose to get funding from, they specialize in tech, or specifically the sort of tech that you are working on. So they kind of know, how much do you have to explain to them versus how much trust do they have versus how much do they kind of know how much time this will take and how many people it's going to need, that kind of thing.
I think the VCs normally leave these things to the founders.
Mm-hmm.
I think they try to, especially at the pre-seed stage. But I mean, maybe to say this up front, I'm not a VC, so maybe I'm not the right guy to ask. But my impression is that at this early stage, one of the important factors is the founding team, and I think as an investor, they don't want to be too active in that regard, because they know that in the long run, for this to be successful, actually the founders have to make these decisions. And the VCs we spoke to, they were all very founder friendly, and they really wanted to see that the company is in the end managed by the founders. So I didn't have the impression that, like, we never spoke so much about these like planning details with them. We spoke more about the product vision and what are the opportunities. How big can this grow? Was more these things that we spoke to them about, and not so much about how many people do you really need for this, and so on. Yeah.
And so, with the three of you, three co founders, I mean, your technical background makes a lot of sense, but how do you decide who does what corporate role? I mean, there's much more to this than just technical skills. You also need to now run a small business. How do you divide up who does the conversations with the VCs, who does their marketing, who does the accounting? How did you guys decide who does what there?
Yeah, we before we started, we had a long question catalog that we all answered, and we went through it all together. And there we already spoke a little bit about the roles, and that I can also generally recommend before starting a company, to really talk about everything you want to know from each other before you really commit to doing that. So it was not a big discussion, actually. So the way we divided it now is that Kevin is CEO. So he's doing a lot of, well, he's in charge of the product work. So what will be new features, defining new features, and defining the specs for that. And also talking to investors as CEO. That's also what he's doing. He's also still doing a bit of the AI work for the backend, but I'm mainly working on these things now. So I'm doing the backend implementation and the AI features, and Mikel is building the front end, the app, together with Min, who's our rockstar engineer. And yeah, Mikel and I together, we basically do the whole cloud infrastructure architecture, so that we do together. And yeah, when there are other things or admin tasks, I mean, normally we just discuss it up front, who will take this, and then we just do it. So
Okay, so it's relatively fluid. All of the
yeah,
all of the tasks which aren't core development tasks are relatively fluid.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Tell me one of the worst experiences or most frustrating technical experiences you've had during this process so far.
I think it's probably a bit surprising, because we're in Switzerland, where we have a lot of great banks. I think the biggest challenge and the most unexpected one was really setting up our bank account. Yeah, now the major bank in Switzerland. I think the whole story is a bit too long, but in the
We have
end,
time. Come on.
okay. So I think they failed to send us the paperwork twice to the right address. So then it was stuck, and then everything is, you can't talk to anyone who knows where the paper is, because it's different call centers managing different parts of the process. So we never could really speak to anyone. And then at some point, I was sent to a branch in Aldisrieden to pick up the paperwork, because they, for some reason, could only send it there. And then at this branch, there was no corporate client advisor. So no one there could actually tell me anything about the contracts. And I had just a few simple questions, but it was mostly apprentices, people there. So then, yeah, okay, we went to Bahnhofstraße, to the main branch, and wanted to speak to someone there. And then I think downstairs there was also no corporate client advisor. And then in the end, we had to ask the security lady to let us call a client advisor. And it was all because our money for the financing round was stuck, I think, at that point. But maybe I got it wrong. Maybe it was just our bank account. But I think then we mentioned the money we raised. And then he was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I can help you." But yeah, we still have the picture of Kevin leaning over the security desk and like calling the client advisor. So yeah, that was not a great experience.
Never has it been so hard to give someone your money, huh?
Yeah.
Coming back to the product itself, how do you prioritize? You said earlier that you have to decide what not to build. How do you decide what the product roadmap is? What input do you get to help you decide what direction you want to take the app in terms of features?
Yeah, I think one important input is the user feedback. So early on, we had a big button on every main screen in the app for user feedback, and every feedback is directly sent into our Slack. So it gets a lot of visibility, and we aggregate it and count what are the most requested features. Yeah, one funny anecdote was we didn't have the dark mode in the beginning, and a lot of users actually got super emotional about this. I remember one comment, it was in all caps, something like, "My eyes hurt, please add dark mode." Yeah, so this one we built quite fast after this. No, but yeah, generally, so that's one big input. And at the same time, we also have a bit of a roadmap what we want to do. And I think, yeah, some of the bigger things were also, yeah, not always requested, because of course users see it a bit from a different view. And for example, we see a little bit the development in AI and what we can build there then on top, or what new features are now possible with better models and so on. And then usually it's a discussion. So we have usually like a monthly meeting where we plan for the month, and where we look a little bit on the roadmap and what things we want to build. And then otherwise we work in sprints, so 2-week cycles for the development. And we try to release once per week.
Once per week, okay, that's pretty often. I see. Yeah. I guess when you have this relationship with your users, you can sort of see, do you get to see where they are, where they're from, what the demographic of your users are? Do you get to see that? And then has it surprised you who your users are?
We see roughly the countries where users come from. Otherwise, we don't have many demographics because we don't ask our users. In terms of countries, I think in the beginning it was quite surprising how many countries users come from. And now I think we got a bit used to it. Especially in the beginning, when we didn't have a lot of users, sometimes we had spikes in countries where we didn't even think that we had any users. And then it turns out that there was someone posting about us on Facebook, like a micro influencer. And yeah, so in the beginning that was quite surprising. Yeah. But yeah, we are users, I think, in over 130 countries. And yeah, some of the countries I haven't even heard before.
It's interesting how these smaller influencers can use your app and maybe you don't, can advertise your app and maybe you don't even know about it. I remember seeing Snipd advertised when ChatGPT was first announced, and within the next couple of months there was just 1,000 well, there still is, but there's endless amounts of YouTube videos of influencers posting all the different AI features and AI applications. And I remember watching one, and it was, these are the top 10 new AI apps. And up there was, Notion and all and Adobe and all these big products which are also pushing their AI services. And in there was Snipd, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. So somewhere along the line, someone did their research and found this app and advertised it. And it's this American guy with a relatively big following, and you guys here in Switzerland don't even know about it. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Are you able to tell me a bit what the future has in store for Snipd? Can you share anything about the product roadmap and what's coming up over the next 6-12 months?
Yeah, sure. I think we have a lot of features in the backlog that we want to implement. Currently, we're working on the AI features for other languages. So right now, our AI features are only available for English, but we want to roll them out for other languages as well. That's one of the most requested features by our users, actually. And then we also have a couple of more podcasts core functionality features that we want to work on. One is more playlists for episodes, and also an episode discovery. And then in the very long run, we actually also see the opportunity to integrate audiobooks into Snipd, because we feel like Snipd is not just built for podcasts, but basically to learn with any audio on the go. Our functionality works for audiobooks as well as for podcasts, and also your self-uploaded content at some point that can be your own audio files, or maybe also text that we then turn into audio. And our goal is really to build this platform to learn on the go with the help of AI.
That makes a lot of sense to broaden yourself, to not be limited to podcasts, but essentially any form of audio. Because I personally jump between long form podcasts and audiobooks, because they're more or less the same to me. Obviously, audiobooks go for a lot longer, but in terms of the reason I listen to them and the times in which I listen to them, to me it's identical. If I had an app which had both together, I'd get rid of my Audible subscription like that.
That's the goal.
Is it technically difficult to host video on a podcast player? Because I'm noticing there aren't many, but more and more of the sort of bigger players. I mean, Joe Rogan was the first one, as far as I'm aware, which had it built into Spotify. But now more and more of the sort of bigger podcasts that I listen to also have video. So I was wondering, is that something you guys would consider implementing as part of your roadmap?
Right now, it's not part of our roadmap, but we are also seeing this development. Regarding the technical difficulty, I think technically it's not difficult as long as the video link is provided in the RSS feed. But I think it's more a challenge from the user interface perspective to have a seamless way of switching between video and audio. But that is also possible. The way we think about it currently is that audio has a great benefit in moments where basically your eyes are busy, but your brain isn't. So when you're driving, when you're running, when you're cooking, and then in these moments, you can listen to audio. And our users can use these moments to be productive, to learn something, to not basically be idle in this time. And that's where we see basically the competitive advantage in these moments against video, because you just can't watch the video in that moment. I think otherwise it's a little bit tough to compete with video because it's just very engaging. And in other moments when you're on a bus or on a train, you can take out your phone and you can open TikTok or YouTube, and then you're competing with these apps for that time. And that, I think, is a bit hard for audio. But these other moments, I think they will always be there. And so that's also why podcasts and audio will always be there, in my opinion, because these moments won't go away.
I wanted to ask you that before giving you my opinion on it, because I think it's stupid, if you ask me. For these, I mean, it makes sense for clips and for shorter videos, but for a 3 hour interview, like you said, for me, the ideal thing to do whilst doing anything mundane is listen to a podcast. If I wanted to sit down and watch something, I'm not going to watch a podcast, I'm going to watch TV.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that I would be really curious to see how that evolves if more and more adopt it, because to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And then I also listen to it at different speeds, at 2x speed or something, and then the video kind of looks super weird. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. So I am curious to see where that goes, but to me, I think it seems like I would never waste my time watching a long podcast. That's just me.
It's interesting to hear.
What do you do to market Snipd? How do you get it on people's radar? Myself, before Snipd existed, I would just use, or first it was Apple, now it's Spotify, and I wouldn't consciously go and look for a new Spotify or a new podcast player unless someone put it in front of me and said, hey, this is better, go and use this instead. So how do you do that?
Our biggest growth channels are still word of mouth. So our users are very passionate about Snipd, and usually they tell their friends and people they know that also like to listen to podcasts about Snipd. And that's where we get most of our users from. Then the second channel is sharing of content. So people share these snips, or sometimes also episodes, and then people find us through that. And since we started introducing premium last year, we also started experimenting a little bit with ads on Facebook and Instagram to basically solve the problem that you said, that many people might be interested in it, but they're not looking for it, partly because they don't think that there is a solution to this, and that might be because they don't know that it exists. Yeah.
I think these days, well, from my personal view, there's an endless amount of new interesting apps, and I'm not tied or attached to any of them. As soon as someone shows me something better, I drop what I've currently got and I'll pick it up. But I also don't actively go and Google newer and better versions of what I already have. I guess these days get lazy. I'm just waiting for the ad to pop up on my social media to tell me that it's there, and then I'll go and try.
Yeah.
What metrics do you use to measure success or KPIs? So I guess next round you're going to go in to request additional funding for an extended period of time. What do you show them to show that we're on track, we're doing well, we're currently a success?
Yeah, I think for us the key metric is weekly active users to show the growth. And since we introduced the premium version of Snipd, it's also monthly recurring revenue, so MRR. And I think these are the main basically growth metrics for us, the most important ones. And then the other very important metric is retention, because that investors are very interested in the long-term retention, especially for B2C companies, because B2C apps, it's hard to keep users for a long time. So investors are very cautious about this and usually want to see 12 months retention ideally. So that is very important. Of course, that's a bit difficult to use as a KPI to steer your product decisions, because it would take 12 months to get feedback. So we usually look at short-term retention, because that also tells you if the product still resonates with new cohorts that are coming in, and any product change you do, you will see the direct effect of the retention on the new cohorts. So those are the three most important metrics: retention, weekly active users, and monthly recurring revenue.
And I guess I'm not sure how much you can tell me, but things are going in the direction that you hoped.
Yeah. We had a very successful launch of the premium plan, and we're growing quite nicely since then.
I was recently listening to one of the latest Tim Ferriss interviews, and they were talking about podcasting itself and the future of podcasting, because the interview was all about him having a new podcaster on, and he was essentially giving him all of the advice that he had. So, I was listening to it for my own reasons, because I'm doing the same thing. The question was asked, what do you think the future of podcasting looks like? Is it at a peak at the moment in terms of number of listeners? Or is it over that? Is it still growing? And he basically said that it is still in its infancy in terms of how many people are listening to podcasts. Whilst there's heaps and heaps, and it's been around now for 10 years, and he said the way he judged where it's going is the amount of ad revenue being put into it. Let me know if this makes sense to you. Basically, the amount of money being funded with advertisement in classic media versus podcasting. Podcasting is still a super small percentage of overall funding and advertisements. Yeah. But it is shifting. And also some of the bigger media enterprises, the New York Times or some of the big companies, now all they have their own podcast platforms. It's not just single people with a microphone interviewing someone. Now it's actually huge companies have invested huge amounts of money, and there is still so much room for that to grow still. Yeah, his view is this is just the beginning. Do you guys think about that, or do you do any research yourself to see these kind of trends?
Yeah, we also believe that it will grow much more. I think that there's still a lot of people that don't listen to podcasts at all, or just not very regularly. I think the insight from Tim Ferriss, I think that's a nice analysis he did with the ad revenue. I also see that. I think podcasts get more and more professional now. That's one thing that we noticed. I think there are also new good podcasts coming out still. So I think Tim Ferriss also mentioned that a little bit, that he thinks about stopping now because there will be more competition now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's also growth on the creator side, and I think that's great. Maybe more high level. I think that, as I said earlier, these moments where your eyes are busy but your brain isn't, they won't go away in our lives, and so I think there's always a place for audio, and I think podcast is a great medium for that. I think what will be interesting is what will happen with better AI models and more AI content. My current thinking is that there will be so much AI generated content that the authentic content of real human interaction will seem more scarce and more valuable. And so I can see that podcasts actually might become more valuable to people because it's still real human interactions and not just an AI generated blog post that hacks the Google search algorithm.
Well, that makes sense, but then at the same time, I can imagine Joe Rogan has said every single word in every single possible way 100 times. So would it be easy to recreate a podcast sounding exactly like him about whatever you want?
That's already possible. Yeah. You mean to mimic the voice?
Yeah, I mean, I see it already. You see it already.
Yeah.
There's I'm scrolling through and there's an advertisement and it's Joe Rogan selling me this new thing, and I'm like, there's no way he said that in a podcast.
Yeah.
But I mean, it must be easy, right? It must be, well, not easy, but I mean, if shitty ads can do this, super smart people with a big team, who knows the damage or the kind of stuff they can pull off with AI. Is it happening already? Are there podcasts, and maybe it's possible to know, maybe it's not, but are there people releasing episodes of podcasts entirely done by AI?
I only know of one, but it's more of I don't know if it's still live, but he's an engineer. I think he now works at OpenAI, and he basically hacked this together. It's a podcast that was published like once per day, and it was basically a version of the Lex Fridman podcast with some guests and the Lex Fridman voice, and already that model, and he built it on his own, was really, really good in mimicking the voices. And it was, they were just talking a bit nonsense. I don't know of any other like bigger podcasts in that direction, but the technology just got better. So right now it is definitely possible. But I think the way podcasting works right now, it's still a lot about the your subscriptions, and you can see basically the source of the conversation, right? So I think that Joe Rogan probably won't have a problem with AI generated clones for podcast apps. Maybe on YouTube, I don't know, but in podcasting, I don't think that this will be a big problem.
I totally agree that it's where I go to just listen to a smart person talk a lot about a thing they know the most about and learn something. I mean, it's just these days you can't get that anywhere else in such a clear, easy format, and
Yeah.
it also it makes all of the boring parts of my life not boring. I can't understand why more people don't do it whilst walking to work or cleaning the house. I love it. So, getting towards the end, I wanted to ask if you if you were to give advice to your past self going through this, or an aspiring entrepreneur thinking about doing something similar to what you've done, what would you give them? What's some learnings, some gold which you can pass along, which might help someone going through a similar journey that you've gone through?
Yeah, it's a good question, but I'm not sure if I can answer it well. I always think that it's really difficult to give like good general advice because it's often very case specific. I think what will in the end really help you. So I think for like general thinking around fundraising and what's important to pick a good co-founder, I think there's good advice from Y Combinator online. So I think I would look for these sources. Paul Graham, I think he wrote a couple of really good blog posts. And yeah, I think the one advice I would give is what I also mentioned earlier, that I would try to reach out to other founders and try to connect with them and ask them then the specific questions you have, because usually they can give you then at least their experience or their opinion on it, and usually they can also introduce you then to people that might help you or might be in the end your investors. So I think that's the one advice that I would give. Yeah.
And I will put those names and references in the show notes. Okay, Ferdinand, thank you very much for your time. Before we go, if people want to download Snipd or they want to learn more about it, what should they do? Where should they go?
You can get the app on Android or iOS, so you can search for Snipd, which is SNIPD, in the App Store, or go to snipd.com and download the app from there. And yeah, thanks for having me. It was very nice. It's my first podcast recording, and yeah, it was a lot of fun.
You can see what your own transcript looks like then, huh?
Yeah. Looking forward to it.
Alrighty. Thanks, Ferdinand. All the best.
Thank you.